Greetings, fellow mathematicians. Let's talk about the mathematics that children will learn in their first year of school. In first term, children will learn to count forwards and backwards to at least 10 and then further. They will also learn to write numerals correctly. They'll learn to recognise numbers both from hearing their name and from seeing them. They will learn about the number before and after. They will then learn to count with one-to-one correspondence with understanding that the last number said is the total. They will understand that a number always represents the same amount. This is number conservation. And they will understand that the number after is one more and the number before is one less. They will begin to subitize, which means that they will instantly recognise the number in a small collection without having to count. Now, this is a lot of learning in one term, and it needs to be taken slowly. It doesn't sound like a lot to us as adults because we have been understanding these concepts for many, many years. But we need to give children in term 1 of their first year of school a lot of time to concentrate on these concepts. They will also be learning about shapes, they'll be comparing lengths, and they'll be describing length as length, height, and distance. Now, these are all just words that we use in English to describe length. They'll also be describing the position of objects, and once they start to do this, they'll be doing it incidentally throughout the term to ensure that their positional language grows and increases. They'll also be learning the days of the week, the day before and the day after, and ordinal numbers. And again, once they've started to investigate these, they will continue to do it incidentally in the classroom so that their understanding continues to develop. In term 2 of the first year of school, children will begin to estimate, and they will also begin to investigate groups. Children do not come to school with a flexible understanding of groups. For example, if they joined 2 groups together to make a group, they may recognise that the final product is a group, but they won't have flexible understanding that they started with groups as well. This grouping concept is very important, and we spend the entire term developing this deep understanding. Children will also start to investigate patterns. Now, the most important part of a pattern is the part that repeats. So children will be focusing on making and continuing patterns by focusing on the part of the pattern that repeats. They'll also begin to investigate length in a deeper way using reasoning. For example, if they have 3 lengths, a red length, a blue length, and a green length, they'll be starting to reason that if the red length is longer than the blue length and the blue length is longer than the green length, then the red length must be longer than the green length as well. They'll also begin to give and follow directions, again using that positional and directional language, and again, once they've started, they'll do it incidentally in the classroom to ensure that it continues to grow. They'll be investigating 3-dimensional objects, starting to think about the dimensions as being up and down, left to right, and front to back. And they will identify that shapes, 2-dimensional shapes, only have 2 of these dimensions. They'll start to look at 3-dimensional objects, recognizing that the surfaces are 2-dimensional shapes. They'll also start looking at corners and the kind of lines on 2-dimensional shapes, whether they're straight lines or curved lines. And they'll also be starting to ask yes and no questions to gather data, which they can then represent in rows. And when they represent their data in rows, they'll be able to tell without counting whether yes had more or whether no had more. In term 3 of the first year of school, children will begin to investigate 10 frames. A 10 frame is simply a rectangle with 10 squares on it, 5 in the top row, 5 in the bottom row. Once they understand the structure of the 10 frame, they'll begin to put counters on their 10 frame, and they'll ask 4 very important questions. How many in the top row? How do you know? How many in the bottom row? How do you know? How many altogether? How do you know? When they've investigated those 3 questions, they'll begin to ask the 4th question, which is, how many more to make 10? How do you know? They will also investigate joining groups to add. They will have 2 numbers which they will make groups of. I like to put the groups in rows, and then they'll be able to see the 2 groups plus the group that they've ended up with. They'll record informally using something and something is something. They will also begin to investigate taking away. They don't use the word subtract until year 1. So taking away means we're going to only start with 1 group and we're going to take away. Now this is trickier because if they have 2 numbers, they have to use reasoning to decide, if I start with this number, do I have enough to take away this number? We don't want to give children a rule about starting with the big number and take away the small number, because it's not a rule and it causes problems if they use the algorithm later on, and also in year 5 and 6, when you can take a large number away from a small number and end up with a negative number. Children are also going to start to investigate difference. Now they're going to investigate difference in 2 ways. For example, having a tower of 5 and a tower of 2. To find the difference between 5 and 2, we could add on to the 2, or we could take away from the 5. They're going to partition single-digit numbers. Partition simply means break. So they're going to break single-digit numbers into 2 parts, into 3 parts, into 4 parts. Partitioning is a very important concept that can be applied to every single number. They're also going to be continuing their investigation of patterns by looking for the error by, first of all, finding the part that repeats, and then finding where that part that repeats goes into some kind of mistake. They're going to continue their investigation of 3-dimensional objects, and they're going to investigate the surfaces, because the surface of a 3-dimensional object can only be flat or curved. They're going to then compare the volumes of objects directly by placing them next to each other, and the capacity of containers by pouring from one into the other. They're also going to start to describe the position of objects in relationship to themselves. Term 4 of the first year of school, children begin an investigation of place value concepts. They're going to investigate partitioning teen numbers, the place value of teen numbers, and friends of 20. When they investigate the place value of teen numbers, it's informal. They don't see the place value chart. But they start to maybe use 2 10 frames, place a teen number of counters on the 10 frames, with 10 in the 10 frame on the left and the others in the 10 frame on the right. They start to investigate that number as in 10 and however many. So for example, the number 14 is 10 and 4. Now they're going to then look at the number 14 and think about which number is telling me I have 4. So if the 4 is telling me I have 4, what is the 1 telling me? The 1 must be telling me that I have 10. Then we're going to look at the word 14 and say, which part of the word 14 is telling me I have 4? The 4 must be telling me I have 4, so what must teen mean? Teen must mean I have 10. For this reason, children in the first year of school only investigate numbers up to 20. We don't want to cause confusion between the teens and the T's. The teens mean 10 and the T's mean groups of 10. Children are also going to partition teen numbers in exactly the same way as they were partitioning single-digit numbers, and they're going to start to investigate friends of 20 using 2 10 frames in the same way as they investigated friends of 10 with 1 10 frame. They're going to also investigate halving. Now, the most important concept of halving is that we can superimpose the halves and look for gaps and overlaps, and it's called a half because it's half as big as whatever we started with. It's half as big as something. This links in with our concept of area, where we're going to compare areas by superimposing, looking for gaps and overlaps. And again, we'll investigate 3 areas using reasoning to find that if the red area is larger than the blue area is larger than the green area, then by reasoning, the red area must also be larger than the green area. We're also going to be looking at mass through hefting, and we're going to be looking at long and short time durations, and also telling time on the hour on an analog clock. Now, lots of children at home don't have access to an analog clock, so make sure you have one in your classroom. In fact, having one in your classroom all year would be fantastic, and drawing attention to when it's o'clock all the time would be fantastic. They're also going to look at Australian coins and notes, just describing what they look like and identifying that the size does not have anything to do with the value. So this is what children will be learning in their first year of school in mathematics.